Alright, so what I want to talk about today is Amazon VPC. There's a lot of information out there, obviously, and I'm going to just kind of go through the process and walk you step by step through creating a VPC and also through setting up a couple web servers and doing some load balancing and stuff. There's obviously, you can go through the VPC wizard and get your VPC set up that way, or you can use the default one. But I found that there's a couple of different things, scenarios and situations that I don't think are handled the way that they should be. So case in point, this here is the scenario 2 VPC with public and private subnets. And while this diagram is accurate and the steps to walk through it and set it all up are also accurate, there's a couple of problems that I see with this as far as using it for a production environment. The biggest problem is that you can't really do a highly available setup because you're limiting yourself to just one zone. Now, in Amazon VPC, if you want to do more than one zone, you have to do multiple subnets for each one, because your subnets cannot span multiple zones in Amazon in the VPC. So if you want to have zone B or zone C, you'll have to create a public and private subnets for each one of those zones. So you can have as many subnets as you needed, but to be highly available, you're going to need at least the same, a mirrored setup in each zone. So in this case, as they're only using zone A, so when we walk through the process, we'll use zone A and zone B, and we'll go through the whole steps and everything that way. Another thing is that here they've got web servers listed in the public subnet, and I don't really see a reason to do that. In the web servers are going to be managed by the load balancer for the most part. So the load balancer would sit here in the public subnet, but your web servers would probably sit in your private subnet or in a private subnet. There's really no reason to have web servers externally accessible, unless you're running like like an open VPN server or a Bastion host or FTP server, something that has to actually have direct external access. Then that's the kind of thing you would put in the public subnet. But as web servers are just serving port 80 or port 443 for the most part, there's really no reason to have them in the public side. So while this diagram is accurate, I don't think that this is, this is just my opinion, but I don't think that they should be in the public side. I think they should be down here in the private side. One other thing that I kind of got hung up on when I first started was the NAT gateway, and the reason that confused me was it used to be that the NAT gateway were physical machines that you would launch, or not physical, but they were virtual machines that you would launch, and you would drop them in the public subnet, and then your route tables, as you can see here, will route everything in the /16 to everything in the same VPC. So the machines inside the private subnet would route to the gateway, and then from the gateway they would route out. And they changed that so that you don't need to have an actual machine anymore. It's just a virtual gateway that they set up, a little NAT gateway, which makes it easier because you've got less stuff to kind of manage. And the principle's still the same. So when you create those, you have to create them in the public subnet, so that it'll route out. And when I first started playing with VPC, for some reason I would get hung up. I would think that you create this in the private network so that the other servers in the private network would have a way to route out, but this is just not how it is. That it needs to sit in the public side. So we'll walk through that whole process step by step and get everything set up. We'll set up an internet gateway, and we'll set up a NAT gateway for each subnet and zone and stuff, so you can see how all that's set up, and then we'll go through the whole process. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. Alright, so starting here on the VPC screen, when you first log in and you come to VPC, you can see that there's one already, and this is the default VPC that that they set up for you. If you were to just go launch an instance, it would launch in this VPC. But like I mentioned before, I don't really think that, for various reasons, I prefer to create my own VPC, so that I have the things that I want in it and not the stuff that I don't need. So this is going to be kind of a tutorial walkthrough of creating all this stuff step by step. So we're going to start with our VPC, and we're just going to give it a name. We're going to call it prod VPC. Very generic, very straightforward. Now, for the CIDR block, you can do pretty much any /16 you want. There's, obviously the 10 network, the 172 network, the 192.168 network. But over the years, I've pretty much used the 192.168 for pretty much everything. That's just kind of what I got used to, so that's what we're going to use again today. And 00/16. Okay, so that'll be our CIDR. So the entire VPC will consist of that whole /16, and then we'll create our subnets accordingly. So if we come down here and select filter by, that way we only see the VPC we're creating. It'll help make things a little easier. So the first thing we're going to create is we have to create 2 private subnets and 2 public subnets. Again, they have to be in their respective zones. So let's create our public ones first. Public, and we're going to put this in zone ZONE, zone A. Okay, and make sure we're using the right VPC, and we're going to put this one in 19168.0.0/24. Okay, so our public zone A will sit right in the root of our subnet, or right in the root of our class A, the bottom. And we're going to create our second one, which is also a public, zone B. Did I do that capital or not? I did. So let's make it all the same. And we'll put this one in B. Again, make sure you've got your VPC selected. And we're going to put this one in. We did that one in 0, so we're going to do this in 1.0/24. Okay. Now we're going to create our 2 private ones. Private zone A. Again, make sure the VPC zone A. And this one we're going to jump up, do 10.0/24. And the reason I'm doing that is so that, if we need to add an additional zone, an additional public zone, for C or D or however long as it, if it expands, then we'll have some room to do that, and we'll be able to stay kind of consistent with our network convention here. Okay, and one more. This is also a private zone B. 168. And we want this to be 11.0/24. Okay, now we've got all these created. The next thing is to create our internet gateway. And for this one, we're just going to call it prod VPC IGW Internet Gateway. Okay. Now you see it doesn't show up on here, and that's because our filter is set. So if we drop that off for a second, we'll see it here. So we can now attach it to our prod VPC. And then we'll change our filter back to that, and we're good. Okay, now we want to add our NAT gateways. Now, on this one, this is where it gets just a little bit confusing, and I want to just kind of touch on this just for a second. So when you create the NAT gateway, remember that it has to be created in the public side, okay? And if you're only doing a test or QA environment or whatever, you only really need one. But if you are doing a production environment where you're going to have multiple zones, you need to have a NAT gateway for each zone. That way, if zone A goes down or zone B goes down, you've still got that high available solution to allow the traffic to flow through. So we are going to create this one, and we're just going to use an IP I already had allocated. Okay. And we're going to refresh, and it'll show up. Okay. Now this NAT gateway, I'm going to write this down real quick so that I can, because we're going to need it later. So this is 304, and we did that one in public A. So 304, right? And it's on subnet CA3. I'm just using the last 3 letters there to help remember which one's what. Let's create another one now. And this one will be in the public zone B. And we're going to pick, which IP did I pick before? Let's do that one. Hope that wasn't the same one. And refresh. Okay, refresh. Alright, so this one is NAT, and it's 7cc with a sub net of 344. Okay, now I'm just writing that down just on a notepad here so I can remember that, because we're going to use it later once these come up. So now we want to go to our route table, and we're going to have to create 3 different routes. This one will be our public route. We only need one of those. Let's do prod VPC public, and make sure we're selected on there. Okay, now we go to routes. Now we're going to add in our internet gateway that we created. And we're going to do our internet gateway here. Okay. And save. Okay, now we're going to create another one for our private. Prod VPC private A zone A. Okay. And this one we're going to add. This time is going to be our 304. Okay, so we wrote that down. That was the NAT from the public zone 01 that we set up earlier. Okay, so the private one is going to route to this NAT that we created in the public zone A. Okay, and we're going to create the next one now. Make sure I get my naming. VPC private zone B. Okay, oops. And this one we want the 7cc net one that we created. Oop. No button. Save. Okay, so now we've got these created, and they've got their routes on them. Now we have to assign these routes to our subnets because they're not currently assigned. So we're going to come up here and order these by name so we can do it in order. And we're going to do our 2 privates. So we come to the route, edit. This is zone A, save. This is zone B, edit. Zone B, private, save. Now the public one, like I mentioned before, it only needs the one, so we only have one public one. So we're just going to put it on both of those. And the reason that we can do it that way is because the internet gateway is handled by Amazon, and it's not zone specific. It's pretty much the only thing in the VPC that spans multiple zones. So we don't have to worry about that. Amazon handles the high availability of the internet gateway, but we do have to do the NAT ones that way. So that's why we did it that way. Okay. So now we've got everything should be set up. We should be good to go. Now the other stuff on here that you see, we're DHCP. We're not going to use DHCP. We're not going to have to change anything like this. It's just it's already set up. It already works. When you launch instances in the VPC, they automatically get their IPs. So this is we don't have to even mess with that. Elastic IPs, we're using these 2 already for our gateway. We'll probably use this one later at some other point, but for now we'll just leave it alone. That was one I allocated already for something else, and I just never released it. Don't have to mess with endpoints for anything. Those are NAT gateways. Now the peering connections, those are so that you can peer multiple VPCs together. So if you've got a prod VPC and a QA VPC and whatever, you can peer those together on the back. And it'll allow you to talk to those networks, allow those networks to talk to each other. If you do that, make sure that the network blocks don't collide. So make sure that they're unique so that they can talk to each other. Otherwise you'll have all kinds of routing problems and it won't work. This is just the default stuff that gets set up. We don't have to change any of that. Same with security groups. We'll handle the security groups when we set up our instances in the EC2. And we're not going to do anything with VPN in this because that's kind of outside the scope of this particular tutorial. So that is the full creation, front to back, of a multi-zone VPC with multiple subnets. So if you needed to do a different subnet for each zone, you could just, same thing, rinse repeat for zone C and so on, as for as many as you need. So, and like over in the Virginia, I'm here in Oregon, so I'm using the Oregon one, but in Virginia I think they have zones like C and D also, so you could do a 4 of them if you wanted. And you can also do multiple subnets, so you could have a subnet for just your web servers, or a subnet for a specific application, or for just your databases, or whatever it is you want. And then you can kind of sandbox those in, or DMZ them off a little bit so that you've got a little extra security between the instances. But for the point of this particular walkthrough, that stuff's not really relevant for what I'm doing. But just so you know that those options are there, you can create basically as many as you need. Just keep track of your networks, so you can do that. All right. So the next step will be to set up a couple instances and do some testing. Now, these ones are old ones that haven't cleared out yet. Let's change this to, just so we're not confused, running. Okay, now before we start anything here, we want to create a couple of things. So we want to create some security groups first. So let's create a production prod external. And we'll just put that right here, and we'll select our VPC, and we'll add, because this is going to be external, let's make sure we can get into it. And for this, we're just going to do it anywhere because we don't care. It'll be open to the world. That's fine. In a perfect, ideally you wouldn't do that. You'd, set it to your own IP or whatever it is. But for the test here, this doesn't really matter. Prod internal. Okay, now on this one, I'm not actually going to add any rules yet. I'm going to create it first, and then I'm going to edit it, because now I can add in this group ID. So if we do all traffic, we can go SG, and we can do prod internal. Now what that'll allow is any machine that is on the internal security group will be allowed to talk to any other machine on the internal security group. So it just allows basically a pass for anything that has this internal security group, and then our external one will be any inbound traffic. So let's go over here. Okay, now another thing we want to create is an AIM role, and this is so that you can have access to the Amazon resources. So let's call this prod servers, and you can make this as specific as you want. You can make it just for a specific app or a specific whatever you want. I'm doing this mostly so that I can have access to the S3, because it makes it nice to be able to move stuff around on the S3, because it basically allows any servers you launch with this role, they will have access to the S3, and you don't have to have credentials sitting on those machines. Okay, so I think we're ready to launch some boxes. So we'll come over here, launch a new instance, select this one. Now just on this one, I use this Amazon Linux AMI. We use this a lot where I work, and basically we don't have any problems with it. It works great for everything we do, and we know that they're optimized. The Amazon Linux images, their kernels and everything are all really heavily optimized to run really well with the infrastructure. Obviously there's some other options. A lot of people favor the Ubuntu images, but for just quick and easy, simple setup, the Amazon Linux ones are pretty easy, and they're the ones that I favor. But you could spend all day long arguing the advantages of distribution. That's not really the point of this. For all it matters, you could run it on a Windows box if you really wanted to. So on this one, we're going to set up our first machine is going to be what's going to be called our Bastion host. Okay, and so it's actually going to sit in the public zone A, and we're actually going to give it an IP address, and we're going to give it a prod servers. Okay, so it'll automatically get an IP for the internal, and then it'll automatically get an external IP that we'll be able to SSH into. And by giving it this prod servers account, we'll be able to access the S3 as needed. So add storage, we don't care about that. This is going to be called our Bastion host. And we're going to give these both. And launch. Okay. Alright. Now we're going to launch another one. And this one is also in the same VPC, but it's going to be in private zone A. And we're just going to give it that, but we're not going to give it a public IP because it's going to be in the private network. It won't have access externally anyway. So that's not. This one will be our web server. And we're only going to give it the internal access on this one. It does not need access to the external. And launch. Yes, I know. Okay. Alright, now you can see these are ones from earlier when I was and they just haven't dropped off yet, so we're just going to ignore those for now. Okay, so this is going to be the Bastion host, and it's going to be how we access the servers from the outside. So what we'll do is we'll take this IP address and we're going to SSH to it. Okay, now if you haven't set up your SSH agent, you can do run SSH agent, and that'll start it up if it isn't already running. On my machine, for some reason, I had to do this to get it to set the variables. I don't know why. And then I just had to add my key to it. And then when you SSH in, you use your key and you use the EC2 user and then the IP address, and it'll let you in. Okay, so now we can see that we are on the server here. This is our Bastion. Okay, it's the same IP, 192.168.0.103. Okay, and then we're gonna check on our prod app server, which did not get a public IP address, as you can see, so it is not externally accessible, but it does have a private IP, and we should be able to SSH to this machine from the Bastion host. Now, you'll notice in my SSH line I'm passing this A, and that's so that it'll do the forwarding for the SSH key. So if I just go 192.168.10.237, and yes, it let me in. Perfect. Okay, now to make sure that everything works, we should be able to do a yum update, and it does. Okay, so it has external access, and you cannot hit this machine from outside. Okay, so that is exactly what we wanted. I'm gonna let this thing finish, and we're gonna launch one more machine. This one is in, you can see it's in 2A, so we're gonna launch another machine, and we're gonna launch it in the private zone B. Okay, same roles, no IP address, and this is going to be our prod app server B. I didn't call the other one that, but whatever. And again, same thing here, internal only. Okay. Let's do instance state running and instance state of pending. Okay. There, now we've got our machines. Oops. Okay, so we'll just put an A on this one just so they're the same. Now you see that there's in different zones, but with this server, it's a different IP. It's 11. Okay, so I should, in theory, be able to access that one as well. Oops. Okay. 136. Oh, it's not up yet. Still booting. There it goes. Okay, and so, alright, so we're gonna update these. Now, so right now we are sitting on the Bastion host. Okay, make sure that we're on the right one. Okay, so we're at 192.168.0.103, so we're on the Bastion host. So I'm going to run a screen session, and I should still be able to SSH to the other servers. I hope. I haven't ever tried this, so who knows. But I want to be able to do them both at the same time. So 192.168.10.237. Perfect. Okay, and we will create a new one, and we'll go SSH to the other server now. Alright. Okay, so now we've got our two servers. Now we're going to go install PHP. Yes. Yes. Okay, our web HTML. Testing from what do you want to call this server B? Server B. Testing from server A. Actually, they might be backwards. Let's see. What is this? 137. Oh yeah. See 111, 136, 10. Yeah. So we're right. That was right. That's right. That's right. Okay. Good. All right. So Apache start. Is it running? Okay. And Apache start. And it's running also. Okay, so if we go in here and do a wget localhost, and we see our index, it says perfect. Okay, index. Yeah. Oops. Yes. Okay, and wget localhost index from server A. Okay. Oops. Yes. Okay. Alright, so next we're going to set up a load balancer. Now remember, the load balancer needs to be, it's going to have access to the two public networks. So we'll create a new load balancer. Not application, classic. We want it in our production VPC. And we're just going to be on port 80. You can add other ports if you need to. And we want to be able to see available subnets needs to sit. We need to have our public zone A and public zone B. Okay. It's going to make a error case anyway, so whatever. Okay, and we're going to give it this one here and that one, because it's going to have external access. Yeah, we'll add port 80 to that one. I don't know if it even needs that. We'll try it. Yeah, that's fine. Ping path, we don't need that. We're gonna just do / and these two tags, we don't really need that. And create. Close. issues. Okay. So here on our load balancer, go to our instances. Registration is still in progress. So we come back over here and go var log star and that way we'll know. I think I have to add my security group. Let's add that. Let's just do that real quick. External inbound edit add HTTP. Whoops. Add HTTP save. Oh, why didn't it update? That's weird. Oh, I see. Okay. Alright, let's go back to our instances. Oh, to our load balancer. Still in process. Do not long that's going to take. There we go. Okay, so it started its health checks on both of them, which is good. That means it's probably going to say, yep, okay. Now we come back over here, and this is going to be the A record. So we'll just do a new window, and we'll do this. Okay, so we've got a test from server A, and if you refresh a couple times, you'll get both servers. You can see it's load balancing properly, and it's accessing both servers just fine. Okay, and that, oops, is that. Okay, so we've got our two servers and two different subnets that are both on the private side. Okay, so our web servers in this are sitting down here in the private subnet. They are not sitting in the public subnet. So that's exactly what I was talking about. I don't. There's no reason to have them in the public side. So anyway, that's how we're set up right now, and as you can see, it's working just fine. If you're, if there's some other reason, if you've got to have that, it's got to be external, then that's going to be on a per environment, case by case basis. Obviously you'll have to make that decision for yourself, but for what for the 90% of what people do, that's not really going to be an issue. So anyway, that's it. If you guys have any questions or comments, post it below and I'll try to answer them. If not, maybe somebody else can answer them too. So anyway, just a quick tutorial walkthrough, VPC, Amazon stuff. Have a good night.